Welcome to First But Last, brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. I am your host, Emmy DeGrappa. Wyoming is called the Equality State because we were the first to give women the right to vote. 150 years later, we wonder what Wyoming women think about the progress toward equality now. Let's find out, and thank you for listening. Today, we are talking to Sarah Sample. She is an award-winning songwriter. She sings songs that weave a trail of stories through folk, Americana, and country. As a singer-songwriter, she has traveled the country and found Wyoming to be her home, where in her words, she says, "The wide open spaces felt like open arms to me. The endless skies and horizons leave room for anyone to belong." Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm love having you, a singer-songwriter. That is so beautiful just in and of itself to be able to write a song. I envy that kind of gift, but I really want to know your journey to Wyoming.
Yes, I would love to tell you. So I grew up in the first years of my life traveling to various states. We lived in Texas and Georgia and Utah. And then when I was 7, my parents moved to Santa Barbara, California. That was home base for me growing up. And I lived there until I was 17. And then later in college, I married a man from Wyoming, James, and he's from Southwest Wyoming, a little town called Lyman. So we met and have traveled often we've been married for 16 years, have traveled all over, lived in a bunch of different places for my work and for his work. And then we landed back in Sheridan 5 years ago.
Okay, so you've been here for the past 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your inspiration to become a singer-songwriter?
I grew up listening to music all the time. My father was a vinyl record collector, and we just listened to everything, to jazz and blues and folk. And having the control of the physical experience of picking a record, a vinyl and putting it on the player and flipping it halfway through felt this really tangible, magical thing to me. And I knew from a very young age that I wanted to write songs and be a singer. So in 6th grade, my mom gave me her Yamaha classical guitar. And I had played piano a little bit before then, but I started writing songs on the guitar and playing. And then when I got into college, I started releasing records and touring. I just released a new record, my 5th album, this last year.
And what was the name of your 5th album?
Red Wing.
Red Wing. Okay. And why did you call it that? What was the story behind that album?
So Wyoming plays a really big part in this new record. I joke that I came limping into Wyoming, like dragging a leg. My husband and I had both been raised in the Mormon faith tradition. We both have ancestors who crossed Wyoming in handcarts in the 1800s and landed in Utah. And then specifically my mother's family came over from Wales. They were coal miners. And then they settled Wales, Utah, which is in Sanpete County. And then, so my husband and I were both raised in that faith tradition. And then about 7 years ago, we decided to leave it, which was a really major transition and choice, and it had a lot of implications for us socially and spiritually and otherwise. And so I think it was, when the floor falls out from under you, what you've kind of built your life upon, then that was the phase soon after that we came to Wyoming. And I don't know how to explain it, but I had never been to Sheridan before. We had lived in Laramie for 1 year, a few years previously, but I had never been to Sheridan. I had heard that it was beautiful, and I had been to various parts of the state, where he grew up in Jackson Hole and things like that. But we came to Sheridan, and he went to his job interview, and I went on a dirt country road, which happened to be 5th Street here. And as you know, in most parts of Wyoming, if you drive 5 miles in any direction, you're on a dirt road. So soon I was on this dirt road. It was late May. So it was this right now, gorgeous, green, beautiful. And I pulled the car over after several miles out on Soldier Ridge Road. And I found myself weeping on the side of the road. And I looked across the hill and there was one lone tree, and under the tree was this mule deer buck. And there were these beautiful birds that were black and glossy with this red shoulder flying around me. And I just was sobbing my eyes out on the side of the road. And I felt like I could breathe differently. And I don't know, it felt this very magical moment, spiritual moment for me. And I, like, the words came into my mind, there is room for you here. And so I wrote this new record about that.
Oh, I love that story.
Yeah.
So what was the heartache to move to Wyoming? Was it leaving your family tradition? Was it just that you're in this new place and you didn't know anybody and you were starting over again?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It was this feeling of, I have been living this life where there's expectations placed on me and that I have to fit within that. And then we leave that tradition, and it was really hard for us socially. We lived in a completely Mormon-surrounded neighborhood, and I think people didn't know how to be a neighbor versus being a church member, friend. So we were really isolated, and it was really hard. And so I feel like coming to Wyoming was this, like, I felt that freedom to be who I am. Anyone I could be anybody here. I could rewrite the story, and I could, like, step into myself in ways I never had. And that there was room for me to be whatever I was, which I don't think I had felt for several years. And it's interesting to me that it happened without anybody around me, right? That moment of kind of accepting a new place and a new landscape and feeling that I could be at home here and be safe here was really related to the wilderness of Wyoming. Just the openness and the wildlife, I think, is an incredible gift to anyone who lives here.
Right. Truly it is. And this year and in the future, we're celebrating Wyoming as the first state to give women the right to vote.
Yes.
And so as a woman who comes from other places and moves to Wyoming, how do you feel as a woman in Wyoming and part of the world? Do you feel different? How do you use your voice to express yourself?
Well, it's interesting. I think oftentimes in entertainment and in music specifically, people want you to entertain. Like, your purpose is to entertain me and to play songs that make me feel good. And I actually think that music and art for centuries, as long as it's ever been in the world, has been used to show, I don't know, protest songs and to show, like, a feeling that differs from the majority, or just to follow your heart, all of these messages. And so I feel like as a musician, one thing that I really value is the ability to create a piece of art that can stand on its own and tell whatever story I want it to tell. And that it can be a really powerful thing when people hear a song that, has the songcraft to support it and also has a message attached to it.
And how to use your music to express yourself as a woman. Do you think there's a difference between a male musician and a female musician? Or do you feel like there's equality for women here where you're living? Or even in your past? And if you've had any experiences about why you feel the need to express yourself as a woman?
Yeah. I feel very happy that I have developed the art and skill and craft of learning to tell my truth through music. And I think that doesn't really change whether you're a woman or a man. But I do feel like women, and especially songwriting women, there's so many things I could say right now about the way women are treated as far as being on the road, what audiences expect you to dress like, what they expect you to be able to master your instrument, what you are being paid. And it's really interesting. I also think there's something that I've talked to many professional women, not just musicians, but just women in general, that if you choose to have children, that it will definitely impact your career path. And in a way, I think it can be devastating for a lot of people, that you can. I watched in my own family, I had a father who was a lawyer and a mother who stayed at home and quit her career to raise children and had 4 children. And then they're divorced. And then my father still has his career that's been growing for how long? And my mother has to piece together, a life and piece together jobs. And so I feel like the challenges that face women, especially women who decide to have children, is really unique. And I wish that there were better support systems for that. I think there's so many expectations for a woman who decides to have children, like this idea of you can do it all. Like you should be able to like be happy and well rested and, never be upset and raise your kids and, make dinner, but also go to work full time. And, there's just these really outlandish expectations, I think, that we put on women to be able to do it all. I think that I used to have that expectation of I can be a working mom, I can tour, I can travel, and I can have kids. But the truth is that children need you. Like they actually like need a mom.
They need someone to take care of them. Yeah.
And I will say, like, being a mother, I love more than anything I've ever done. But there is something about playing music. There is something about the way I feel on a stage performing that I don't get that feeling anywhere else in my life. I can't create it outside that moment. And so the idea that we can like find this big balance, I don't know that we can. I think it's just you push until you feel a boundary. And then when you feel the boundary, you back off from it and you give a little in the other direction. But the idea that we can have it all or that we can have this perfect balance, I haven't found it yet.
We're looking for the perfect life, right?
Right. Right.
But your children do need you. And I think I find that for women that you get really torn because you love your children so much. And you know that you love your passion, which is writing songs and singing and performing.
Right.
So sometimes something isn't always going to work out. Something you might miss a game or miss something they're doing to do something that you want to do.
It's true.
And how do you reconcile with that?
I think women all over the world are trying to reconcile that and find their way through it, and it does feel like you're in the weeds often of trying to find how do you be present and connect with the world through the gifts that you have and connect and raise your children to be powerful women. I have 2 daughters. It's interesting though, because the thing that I get told most often from people who come to my concerts and they know that I have daughters, they say to me, I'm so grateful that you're showing your daughters that it's worth pursuing a career, that it's worth honing a craft or following a dream. So I have people often tell me that they feel that it's valuable that my children see that I can do that. There's a joke in the music world that songwriters, that folk music makes hundreds of dollars. There are hundreds of dollars to be made in folk music, which is pretty accurate. And growing up with a single mom, I think I felt the strain of that. We moved rental to rental often. And of course, we were well fed, we were happy, but I did feel the strain of my mom trying to make ends meet. And so a few years ago, I decided I'm going to go back to nursing school. And so I went back to nursing school and now I'm a nurse too. And I think that also is a message that I want to give to my children, that you need to be able to provide for yourself in the world. I don't ever want my children to be dependent on a man to pay for their life. I want them to be able to pay for their life and to not have to make choices based on money, but to be able to feel independent in the world. I think that is a true gift one can give themselves.
And really amazing and wise that is your message. And that should be a message to every young girl, that make sure that you can take care of yourself. Make sure that you can pay your way and don't depend on anyone else, to make you who you want to be.
Right. And I am so happy that I'm married to the person I'm married to. And my mortgage is not dependent on my nursing salary, but I wanted to find a job that if it was ever the case, then I could provide that for my children, that I could take care of them and I could take care of myself. I think I grew up in a culture that really valued women as in the home and as mothers. And this is not trying to put down any stay-at-home mothers, because I think that being a mother is an incredible amount of work and is a job, is a full-time job. But I think that there was kind of a cultural message of, you get married and you have babies. That's like your purpose in the world, and your husband will have the job and make the money. And I want my daughters I don't want them to do that.
You want them to know they have a choice.
Yeah. And it's hard for me because I really grew up with a mother who's incredible, compassionate, is like the best human I know, and really allowed me to become a musician. She comes to all my shows. She's my number one fan. She believes in me more than anyone believes in me. I mean, I would write these terrible songs and she just would be crying at the end that they were so amazing, So she really fed me this confidence of, you can do anything you want. But now that I'm here at this point in my life, what I want to convey to my daughters is like, yes, you can do anything that you want. And if you choose to be an artist, I want you to be an artist. But you also need to go to college and get a degree. You also need to have like plan B in place.
Plan B, yeah. Do your passion, but always, and everybody should always do their passion, no matter, everyone should always
even if you don't get paid, of course.
Outlet of expression. And on that note, I want you to sing us a song.
Okay, perfect.
And tell us the name of your song.
Okay, so this is the song that came from the moment on the side of the road, surrounded by red-winged blackbirds. It's called Red Wing. I'm going to start with a poem by Wendell Berry and then go into the song. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. And for a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. I make out in a high desert sunrise. Neither of us said a word. I found God in the quiet of the golden plains, on the red, red wings of blackbirds. I saw a stag in the shade of a cottonwood. He looked my way but didn't stir. He held his ground, now I'll hold mine, on the red, red wings of blackbirds. Past the pavement, past the roads, past the world that I used to know. Well, that's where I wanna go. Well, I took my daughters to the woods where their hearts would not be cursed, where they could sail above the trees, on the red, red wings of blackbirds. Regret, regret, I had my share, so many, they all just blur. But I'll burn them bright, I'll burn them fast, like red, red wings on blackbirds. Past the pavement, past the roads, past the world that I Well, that's where I wanna go. Well, someday soon my life will pass, but I got some living to do first. Still, when it is my time to go, take me on the red, red wings of blackbird. Blackbird, blackbird.
Thank you for blessing us with that song. And I want to ask you, where can we find your music? What's your website?
You can go to sarahsample.com.
Okay, sarahsample.com.
Yep, or it's on iTunes or Pandora or Spotify, any of those.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to First But Last, brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. Please join us again next week as we continue our conversations with women from around the state. You can also find us at thinkwy.org, where we continue the conversation on our blog about the history, journey, and the challenges of Wyoming's intrepid women living in the Equality State. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review on iTunes. Thank you for listening.